to move on. In a matter of days, Joe Biden will be announcing who his various cabinet secretaries are going to be. He'll be meeting and talking to members of Congress in both parties. So Trump, to me, becomes increasingly irrelevant, other than the peaceful transfer of power. A sitting president, an incoming president working carefully on transition has always been a hallmark of our democracy. So that's what concerns me. It doesn't concern me the statements he's going to make, or is there some legal route here for Trump to undermine that? We know that's not the case. But we need, members of his administration to work cooperatively with the incoming Biden administration. But listen, the world's going to look very different really in a matter of days. Again, as he says, here's who's my Secretary of Treasury is going to be, my health secretary, my attorney general. I think he'll start talking to Mitch McConnell and Republicans in Congress, of course, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. So I think that's where we are. So I think we should not pay much attention, in my view, to the things Trump's saying about the election. The important thing is he going to do anything to undermine the peaceful transfer of power in terms of working cooperatively? And is he going to fire a lot more people? Are there going to be executive orders done to benefit, he or his family? That's what we need to be concerned about.
And David, what tone would you advise Joe Biden to take vis-a-vis those folks who did vote for Donald Trump and who may be believing what he says about a fraudulent election, an election that has been stolen? It's one thing for you, you're a Democrat, you say we're not going to pay attention to that, but there are millions of Americans who will. How should Joe Biden speak to them and address that?
Well, my sense, Savannah, is you're going to have everybody from Senate Republicans to Republican governors to even folks on Fox News saying the election's over. Just to go back to the map Chuck Todd was at, this is not a close election historically. Okay, Joe Biden's going to win with a higher percentage of the popular vote than Barack Obama did in 2012, and certainly Donald Trump did in 2016, than George W. Bush did in either of his elections. And his electoral vote's going to be north of 300 in all likelihood. So it's a significant win. And again, I think things start changing today. That intensifies tomorrow. So Donald Trump may not be satisfied, but I think Joe Biden is going to reach out to those voters. I'm sure it's one of the first things he's going to say tonight is I'm going to be a president for all of you. And speak to the fact that I know a lot of people voted against me. I know people have concerns about the election because of what Donald Trump's saying, but this is a free and fair election, and I'm going to go out there and fight with everything I have for you, which is he's going to have the toughest challenge any incoming president has had since FDR. So he needs to rally the American people, as many as he can, around some of his policy prescriptions and how he's going to lead us out of this pandemic.
And I think, too, Savannah, everything we've seen from the former vice president, now president-elect, underscores that he's likely to do what David was just outlining. This is someone who has had a sort of North Star on his campaign all the way along. He had so many people doubting him in the primary, in the general election, even his own, sometimes campaign staffers behind the scenes wondering if he was making the right set of decisions. But he stayed true to that, even in the face of that kind of opposition. He kept saying, what's happening on Twitter does not represent what's happening everywhere. The American people want something broader than what's happening. And he ultimately was vindicated in that. And everything that we know about Joe Biden says that he is going to be someone, he has a deep, long-standing, decades-long, really, relationship with Mitch McConnell, who, may be the Republican leader, again, may not be, depending on those two runoffs. But he is someone who, when Obama was president, when we had President Obama, it was Vice President Joe Biden who was cutting deals with members of Congress and working with those relationships. So I think we are about to enter a very different era. And the cabinet question is still an open one, I think, partly because control of the Senate is not determined yet. So the kinds of cabinet nominees that Joe Biden could get through a Democratic Senate might be different than the ones he could get through a Republican Senate. But I'm not sure that Joe Biden really would want. I feel like he knows who he wants in his cabinet, and it may actually line up with a Republican Senate.
Is this the signature challenge, Andrew, about that? The parties are always at loggerheads. But within his own party, he has, as Casey just outlined, a long history of rather centrist streaks. That is not where the activism in the Democratic Party is right now. How will he navigate that terrain?
Well, there are two pieces to that, I believe. The first is the transition between a hostile White House and Joe Biden. And there's some predicates for this, because when President Obama came in from George W. Bush, they were overwhelmed with how welcoming the Bush White House was to them, despite their policy disagreements over Iraq and a host of other issues. They found a roadmap. It was an absolutely professional transition. Turn the page to the transition to Donald Trump. The Obama White House went about it the way they had been welcomed. They planned all sorts of tabletop exercises. I was at the White House one day doing an interview with Susan Rice. She was about to go into a tabletop with the incoming Mike Flynn national security team.
On a pandemic.
On pandemic.
Yeah.
And there was nothing planned by the incoming team. They had nobody to meet with because there had been no appointments. Remember, Chris Christie and the transition had been fired. They had replaced Chris Christie with Mike Pence on the incoming transition. They were never organized on policy. It was never about policy. It was always about Donald Trump. And that has been the case. So you're going to find not only the hostility, but there are so many vacancies in the White House chief of staff and all of that. So they're going to have problems in just the transition. But well, there are rules. They're very well laid out, but they were never observed by the Trump team on coming in.
But do you have to wait till the elections are certified?
Well, they do have transition offices that are set up even when they become nominees, but now it goes into full gear. So they're ready. The Biden team's ready. But you're absolutely right, Savannah. They're going to have to navigate AOC, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders may want the labor cabinet position. They're going to push back because they're going to say that there's a Republican.
When you're talking about mandates, though, Chuck, do you think there's a mandate for that?
No, the mandate is for, again,
I would think the results of this election say no.
No, exactly. One of my favorite semi-battleground states, New Hampshire, and I say semi because it was one that I think the president, again, so many strategic mistakes we're going to look back and say that he made. New Hampshire and their inability to get that back into play was one of them. But New Hampshire decidedly, voted for Joe Biden, re-elected their Democratic U.S. Senator by double digits, and below the ballot decided to hand power on a local and state level to Republicans. The point was is that they're clearly, and I go back to the 4 years ago, none of the above vote, they didn't like Trump or Clinton, and decided to vote for a third-party candidate. That group of voters decidedly went ahead and chose Joe Biden. But they did not choose a Democratic Senate. They did not choose, in many cases, Democratic House members. And so that's going to be definitely that challenge. But I want to go back to something David Plouffe said, which is, I do think another way to sort of suck the oxygen out of whatever the president might try to do in the agita around the election is you roll these nominees out fast.
Exactly.
I think before Thanksgiving, you're going to have a government in waiting. Before Thanksgiving, this is before the elections are certified technically. But what it does is it